Hey everyone, welcome back to the Retrospective Collective Podcast, or TRC Podcast. A monthly podcast where we examine video games from the past and how they have impacted the gaming industry. I'm one of your hosts, Tristan Zhang, and I'm joined by...
the other spectacular host, Albert Corsten.
And the new host, Alex Nestor.
Yeah, we kind of revamped it a little bit. I know we've been on hiatus for a little, I guess since July. But we were kind of reworking the podcast. We're making a website. So we thought this would be a good time to bring this back with kind of a couple fresh points, fresh perspectives, and a new face.
And, we're still feeling it, really feeling it here. So we'll keep that.
Are we going to use that?
I don't know. Did you want to keep that?
We could
we're not going to keep it. I'm just putting it in there, as a throwback.
Yeah.
Since
it's Alex's first time, why don't you just kind of give us a quick intro so the viewers can know who you are?
Yeah, so I'm basically just really a big fan of older games, a lot of the N64 and Xbox era. So, yeah, just really enjoy a lot of those games, and it's really fun to think about what they've done to really enhance the future generations of games.
What would you say is your favorite game?
My favorite game? Now, that's a difficult one. I would have to say it would probably be Banjo-Tooie.
Ooh, good choice. We haven't done that one yet, so...
Yeah.
We did Banjo-Kazooie, though, so...
Well, you did.
There we go.
Check out that episode.
Tooie made quite a few changes to that series, and I think it was pretty good ones, so... yeah, we can cover that a bit more later.
Yeah, let me put that in my to-do gaming list, which is like 100 games long at this point.
Yeah, at this point, yeah.
So we decided to change it up. I know everyone was really excited to listen to Albert fail at guessing which game I picked for the week.
Excuse me, I got that sometimes.
And me just Portal. Tossing out... Oh, you got Portal.
I got Portal, okay.
That was mostly on my screw-up. But
wow.
We decided to get rid of that just so we can get a little bit more research done and thinking done instead of kind of putting both the co-hosts on the spot on the day of the recording. So we'll see how it goes. I think it'll be fine. Plus, we got rid of the news segment. We'll be putting that in our new podcast, which I will go into detail later. But this will now be 1 full hour, at least, of pure retrospective goodness.
And collectiveness.
So, today on the revamp, we have a game from 2006. We got rid of the 10-year rule, and I guess it doesn't matter since this game's 12 years old now. Albert, do you want to give us a quick intro, or maybe some hints about this game?
All right. Well, I don't know. It's a pretty popular game from a pretty popular series. I might be giving away too much here, but it's from your boy Todd Howard and his lovely band of game developers over there, and I think they're on the East Coast.
Merry men and women.
Merry men and women. You know what? It's 21st century. Merry people. Okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it followed up what some consider one of the most revolutionary sort of games in the Western RPG open world genre. And it definitely changed a lot of things that its predecessor did to kind of even change a lot more in terms of how we look at RPGs and how they play and how they feel. And if you haven't already gotten what I'm getting to, Tristan, I don't know if you're doing the big reveal here, or if they just read the title of the episode and already know.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. If the viewers are a little smart, they probably read the title of the episode. But it is indeed The Elder Scrolls IV: Oblivion, released in March 20th, 2006, by Bethesda Game Studios, and as Albert said, our big boy Todd Howard is this his crown jewel? Would you say?
No, I wouldn't say it's his crown jewel.
Really? I don't know. I think it's a pretty hard one to beat, but
I hate to say it, but I would say Skyrim was more popular. I don't know if it depends on how you want to look at Crown Jewel. If you look at like popularity versus genre defining versus
Oh yeah, then Skyrim wins it.
Yeah.
Flat out, but yeah. Okay.
So I don't know what you want to put as Crown Jewel.
It was released on, I guess, 4 main platforms: PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and Windows. I'm not sure why I put down mobile phone there.
Let's not talk about that one.
Okay. Was it actually the N-Gage? Because I'm worried.
I don't remember what system it was for, but it was just pointless caching game.
Okay. And it sold roughly 7 million copies across all of them, so it's pretty big game for its time. So I guess we can kind of kick off into first impressions, or how people were introduced to this game. Alex, what was your first exposure to Oblivion?
So to Oblivion, interestingly enough, I was actually introduced to the Xbox 360 version of Oblivion, because at the time I didn't have a PC strong enough to actually play this game. Because for the time it came out, it was actually pretty impressive graphically and in terms of system requirements, so I had to end up actually using it on the 360, and it played pretty good on that system. I really just fell in love with it. So,
and Albert,
mine was a more interesting exposure. So, when I was a wee lad, and I was the youngest of my brothers, we had one computer that was used for gaming. So, of course, my oldest brother, and this game was rated mature, if I recall correctly.
Yep, it was.
So it was the first Elder Scrolls game to be rated mature. So obviously my oldest brother was the first one to pick it up, and when my first exposure was not even playing the game, it was just watching him go through it and kind of learning what he did. And then I would say maybe 2 years later, I finally got to play it on my own, and then my playthrough, like, you watch someone play it and it kind of alters your aspect of how, like, you want to build your character. So it was very similar in terms of, like, the abilities and the combat style that I chose. I went, like, more like a battle mage type. But that's because, I don't know, that's more of because playing these Western RPGs, you want to use the magic because that's the cool thing, but you also want to be able to use swords, so kind of naturally fit for me to go to that playstyle, but yeah.
Yeah, I think I was pretty late to playing this. 06, I was probably still enveloped in my GameCube and my Wii when it came out. I think I picked this up on disc when kind of like the Game of the Year edition came out. And I remember not liking it at all because I want to be like a ninja arrow man.
Yeah. Hey, you can do that in Skyrim. You can do that in Skyrim, man.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I tried that in Skyrim as well, but like I felt the stealth mechanics weren't really great, and I would always get spotted.
Yeah, I would never say that was a strong suit of the Elder Scrolls series.
Yeah, so I remember just getting really frustrated, and I just like blazed through the game really quickly, and I haven't really picked it up since.
Yeah, in every, like, I would not just point this at the Elder Scrolls game, but in every, like, non-stealth game that has stealth mechanics, like, the first hour that you're trying to stealth is always playing around, and for me it's almost, how much does the engine detect on the stealth? In terms of some games, like, it takes into account sound, so, like, when you're stealthing around, you're like, does this game use sound to determine where I am? Sometimes it's just, like, purely visual, like, if the enemy is facing you, then you'll get caught. But if you're, like, walking right behind them, like, really loudly, they won't hear you and you won't get picked up or you won't get caught or anything.
Right, yeah, and you see how the NPCs react to sounds and things like that.
Yeah.
What their AI does to actually react to it.
And the weird thing about Oblivion is it's like, you could never really figure out which ones it did. And like,
yeah.
It was like, and then it depended on like your sneak level and like I mean, with all Elder Scrolls games, once you get sneak to 100, it's like you can, as long as you're wearing like not like super noticeable things, you can pretty much just walk in front of people crouched, and they won't even know you're there.
Hey man, just take off your shoes. You'll be silent then.
Exactly.
I remember explicitly I was crouched and I was walking, and I guess they like saw me through some tiny hole in the environment, and everyone just comes and attacks you at that point. And I think that was another thing. Once you disrupt the flow of people in that game and you draw aggro, it's just like never ending. Like you attack someone in town and like they'll send the whole army after you, and it just gets worse and worse.
In Oblivion, everyone was sidekick. If the moment you did a crime, everyone knew about it. They were very on top of things.
Yeah, man. You go into someone's house and you pick up a fork on accident, and the whole guard is outside the door waiting for you, or just barging in.
Yep.
Yeah, lot of loading. I remember reloading to make sure I don't steal that apple off of a table by accident.
Those are some valuable apples, man.
All right, so actually, speaking of kind of Elder Scrolls in general, Alex, I know you played Morrowind. Albert, was this your first Elder Scrolls?
Nope, I played Morrowind and I played Tribunal as well.
Okay, so just kind of in general, what did Oblivion change? What did it do better? Like, if I've only started with Oblivion, so it'd be nice to kind of know what does it mean to be an Elder Scrolls game? Like, what kind of RPG elements?
So for me, like, it's Elder Scrolls has definitely, and it goes into, I think it's kind of defined Bethesda in general as a studio, but it's sort of that the primary thing is just getting immersed into another world. Like, Bethesda is so good at world building, and just starting from Morrowind, just like, I know Tristan hasn't played it, but like you start off the game at the very beginning, you're going to a port, and I think you're like a prisoner or something.
Yep.
And it just kind of throws you into this world, and you're like, what am I going to be? What am I going to do? Like, who is my character? Is just defining who you are and sort of just exploring the world and going out and like just immersing yourself is a big part of being an Elder Scrolls game.
So it's kind of like different from the JRPG trope of you're some chosen. I guess Skyrim kind of broke that one, but like you're not some chosen one that's, you know, the superhero.
Right. Typically in an Elder Scrolls game, your character does usually become some sort of champion or hero of the realm, but he doesn't start out that way. They're almost always prisoners, and then they just...
That's actually true. All 3 games, you're a prisoner at the very start.
Exactly. Yeah, you start out as this no life with no real backstory other than you've somehow landed yourself in prison, and then you suddenly get out, be whoever you're going to be, and then if you do the main quest, you're going to become the champion of the realm, basically.
I find it really interesting how you always start off as a prisoner, and I don't have any like facts to back this up, but I assume a majority of players play like a righteous player. So it's like you're always gonna
right,
like
yeah.
In Skyrim, like in Oblivion, like you're literally in jail in Oblivion. Skyrim, you're about to get beheaded, and then it's like, oh, but now I'm gonna be this good guy for the rest of the game, and it's like, oh, okay.
This is not what Todd intended. This is not part of his vision.
Yeah,
you should be going around murdering everyone.
Well, I mean, you can't do that if you want. No.
But yeah, that is a pretty cool aspect of Elder Scrolls series, though, is that for the most part, your character doesn't have any sort of godly powers that separates him from everyone else in the game. You're usually bound to the same rules that all the NPCs are following, with the exception of, I guess, some of Skyrim's shouting mechanic, but...
Yeah, I would say Oblivion was the number one where, like, literally you were the same as all the characters. Like, you didn't have any other special abilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a pretty cool touch.
I think another big thing about the Elder Scrolls, and it's just kind of coming in from Morrowind, is like doing. I love the feeling of doing like faction quests and like rising through the ranks of different factions, whether that's like the Fighters Guild, the Mages Guild, the Thieves Guild, stuff like that.
Right. Yeah. There's always been very strong side quest content that could almost, in some ways, be established as a main quest in some other games. That's a very cool aspect.
Mm-hmm.
So people always talk about, I've basically wasted my life into Elder Scrolls. Can we do a quick playtime check of how many hours each of us have put into the game, roughly?
Oh god, I'm not even sure. I put at least, I would say about 350 to 400 hours into the 360 version of Oblivion, and then when I got into the PC version later on, maybe like 3 or 4 years afterwards, I put in probably another 250, 300 hours just doing mods and stuff.
Oh god, I'm nowhere near those levels. I mean, when I first played through it, after watching my brother like 2 years later, I probably put in like 40 to 50 hours. But then when I picked it up on PC like 4 years ago, 3 to 4 years ago, I probably put in about 80 to 90 hours again on another playthrough.
I see. Okay. As you know, I don't like RPGs too much. So I think I did the bare minimum. Maybe I think I put like 30, 40 hours. Did a little bit of side quests, beat the main mission, and then I just kind of gave up. We can talk into why later, but yeah, I didn't spend too much time on it.
Yeah, and definitely when you get into the playtime thing, we'll get into later on why potentially a lot of people don't play this game for a super long time, and that's mainly due to the leveling system and how the game difficulty scales. But
yes, that's definitely a sore point.
We'll get into that later.
All right, so Oblivion, relative to major titles these days, didn't actually spend that much time in development. It was developed in 4 years, and it actually got pushed out half a year-ish for release. It was supposed to come out with the Xbox 360, but they were kind of fixing up a bunch of things, so it got pushed out to March. It's interesting to see how development times have gotten so long recently, but like if you look at all these games from the past, even when they're bringing in revolutionary things, kind of unique elements that have not been seen in games before, they were able to do it pretty quickly. So that being said, what do you think are some points that Oblivion changed within the gaming industry? And like, how did games copy these things, or at least try to copy these things?
I think a big point to say is that, and I don't know if a lot of, I think a lot of companies and games have looked at it for inspiration, not necessarily that carbon copied it, but Oblivion did a really good job of kind of the RPG dungeon, like where you loot and then you sell and then you do a quest and then you go to a dungeon and you loot and you sell. It was a very, I would like to say, like, I mean, obviously, like after a certain amount of time, like the charm kind of wore off, but for the first 40 to 50 hours, I thought it was a very captivating kind of gameplay cycle in terms of wanting to get better loot and then like doing quests and then going back to town and selling and kind of diddling around in town for a bit and then going back out to dungeons. It did that very well.
Right, yeah. Oblivion, the Realm of Cyrodiil just had plenty of ruins and castles to run into, enemies that would just be out in the forest and things like that. It really made good use of the open world aspect, and I think a lot of games have looked to that and attempted to replicate that.
Yeah, definitely some of the world building aspects. I mean, I said before, Bethesda's like, this is, if I was to pinpoint their greatest strength of their games, it's their world building. And I think Morrowind did it well, but I think Oblivion really took it to the next level in terms of creating the world of the continent of Cyrodiil around the player.
That's pretty interesting to note because, like, within the past few years, we've had a large amount of open world games come out. Breath of the Wild, MGS5, Final Fantasy, I guess Far Cry
Witcher
is also
3.
Open world.
Yeah.
Witcher 3. And many of them kind of fail in some aspect where Oblivion was able to do really well. It wasn't as big as some of these maps, right? Like, I think the main thing these days is like, oh, we have 100 square mile map that
right,
you can walk forever.
That's always the tagline they release, like, oh, it's this much bigger than last games, so like some big sell line, yeah.
Yeah, I remember Dynasty Warriors 9, they released a video of one dude just walking from one end to the other as like a marketing video, pretty much.
Yeah.
But the game ended up just not having much. And I think I do agree with you. Oblivion had a lot of events like where you're walking to a place or another, and then I remember just getting ambushed all the time.
Right, yeah.
That scared me.
There'd be bandits on the road all over the place. You'd wonder where the Imperial Guard is ever doing, other than attacking people who are stealing pies.
You mean they're sweet rolls?
Yeah, they're sweet rolls.
Yeah, but kind of another thing that, and I guess it's a good time to kind of bring this point up, was when Oblivion was first coming out, they touted, instead of obviously they brought like the big map and everything like that, but one of the biggest features was the Radiant AI. And that was sort of that feature where every single NPC in the game has their own daily schedule. When they're hungry, they go eat, yada, yada, yada. When they're tired, they go to their bed and sleep. And I think, although it didn't, in practice, it didn't work out as much as they hoped it would.
No, it was a little embellishment by Todd Howard, but it's kind of par for the course now.
Yeah, but I feel like that was definitely the first trendsetter to kind of getting that going in the right direction for a lot of RPGs. In terms of
yeah, definitely. Yeah, in terms of other games, I think Oblivion was the first major one that really started to make NPCs that felt like they at least had some sort of actual purpose in the game world other than standing around waiting for you to sell them crap.
Or like having an exclamation point and they're just like, talk to me.
Right, and they just stand in place forever all day.
Yeah, exactly. So definitely.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that games these days can't even do, so it was pretty ambitious.
Uh-huh.
Essentially, the Radiant AI, although it tried to make every NPC seem unique and, like, I guess, personalized, like they have a personality, is what I'm trying to say, it definitely put the foot in the right direction in terms of the future games that would try to attempt that and build on that.
Yeah, I think they really did try to build off of that and improve the Skyrim AI a bit more. You can tell that by the routines that the Skyrim AI does instead of Oblivion. But yeah, overall, it's still obviously a bit of a scripting thing that they're doing with each NPC, but it's still cool that each one kind of does their own thing each day.
So, I mean, we've talked about broader things that the game did really well, but I know a lot of people like to get into the nitty-gritty and talk about some of their favorite quest lines, because I know Oblivion had a lot of content, a lot of quests. So, are there any favorite quests that you guys had?
All right, so I'll start off. One of my favorite quests was, and I don't remember too in depth, so don't murder me over like corrections. Oh yeah, this actually wasn't this, but whatever. It's one where there's a painter who's gone missing, and essentially you eventually find out that he's been trapped within one of his paintings, and this is like one of the first things that like, and I don't think Skyrim did this at all, where it's like it transports you into the painting, and you need to fight off little painted troll guys, and I think you could coat your weapons in turpentine to do extra damage to the painted trolls. And then eventually you find the artist trapped in his painting and you save him. But that was a great quest. And then, Alex, did you have a quest that you wanted to say? Because I can keep rattling on another quest that I really liked.
I really can't give a specific quest, but I think a quest line that was just superb in Oblivion was the entire Thieves Guild quest line. It was incredible what they did with the Thieves Guild in that game, where you'd be punished actively for actually just killing NPCs. You couldn't just kill everyone and then take the treasure and leave. And they set up really cool scripted events. Sometimes this was part of where Gabriel would show his face and you'd just soft lock the game easily, but they did a lot of cool things, and it just built up to this grand heist where you're just like stealing everything and you're just going after the Elder Scrolls and crazy things like this. So
stealing an actual Elder Scroll, man.
Yep, you're just going and stealing the Elder Scroll from some blind monks. Just no big deal.
And then another quest I really liked, it's in the Dark Brotherhood quest line, where I think it's one of the earlier quests where you're locked in a building with 6 party guests.
Yes, the Manor quest.
The Manor quest, yes. And essentially they're told that there's a prize in the building, and they won't unlock the door to the mansion until someone finds the prize. But it actually is you're supposed to kill all of the NPCs in the building, and it kind of plays hand in hand with the Radiant AI, where you kind of learn people's schedules, and so you can find them in a room alone and kill them. But it also had a great amount of writing to it, where you could learn more about the guests, and you could like find out about a guest, and maybe he wants to blackmail another guest, and you can have that guest kill each other, or like that they're plotting against each other. And it has so many branching story paths, which unfortunately a lot of the quests in in Oblivion were a little linear, but that one had a lot of branching paths where you could either just kill everyone on your own, get them to kill each other, whatever. It was a really cool quest.
Right, and the NPCs, they would have different dialogues. If you would kill them in different orders, they'd have different reactions. Some of them would actually be happy that they got killed. So it was an entertaining quest, basically a Clue whodunit kind of deal. But yeah, there were just some great scripted quest lines in Oblivion that I think they really tried to test the limits of what Gamebryo could accomplish with their Radiant AI system.
It was a great quest. And then the last quest, I'll bring up one last quest. Super short, but it was a very unexpected one. I forget what city it was in. It might have been like Cheydinhal or something. But you there's like an inn that's a boat. It's a floating inn. And if you rest for the night in the inn, when you wake up, pirates have taken the inn hostage.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
And you wake up in the middle of the ocean on the boat, I think, and then you essentially have to free, like, I think you can talk to, obviously it's an Elder Scrolls game, so you don't have to kill everyone, but you can kill everyone and then get the boat, the inn boat back to town safely, or you can convince the bandit leader to essentially turn himself in and take the boat back. But that was a really funny quest that I really liked too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there were tons of cool quest lines like that. They had ones that, where you were going on a haunted ship, you're fighting all these phantoms or ghosts, and yeah, they were just really great quest lines that they created and scripted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so yeah, we brought some good things that the game was able to do. How about bad things, or like things where it just completely fell on his face? All right, I'll go first. I think so. Albert brought in the fact that the game did the whole like loot gather craft cycle really well. Maybe this is just from me personally, but whenever I played like a first person game back in the day, I just thought it of an action game. So I played the game like an action game, and whenever there were like things to craft, I just kind of got overwhelmed. So maybe that's the thing. Like the accessibility for kind of casual players like me was very low, and I just couldn't get into it. Right, like the world building was fine, the quests were fine, but like the sheer amount of things that you could do in the game was just so much, and it was really hard to wrap my head around it.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of things. If you just didn't actually take the time to learn them, you would just get lost as hell if you were trying to do a lot of the optional content in the game.
Right.
Yeah, because there's just so much you have to learn about the enchantment system and things like that in the game. Soul recharging for your weapons, things like that. It's just insane the amount of details they put in the game and all these nuanced systems that you have to learn if you want to have your character be the most min-maxed, strongest ruler or barbarian, whatever the hell you're running.
Yeah, and let's just get into that right now, and because we brought it up earlier, it's the enemy scaling system in this game was completely broken. And by that, I think it was the same as Skyrim in terms of, I think it was every 5 levels, every single enemy in the dungeons would level up to like their next form. So it would go from like goblins or whatever to trolls, I think, and then trolls to ogres or whatever when you hit like 20, 25 or whatever.
Yep. Oblivion had that system, as well as enemies' health would scale by every single level you had. So
yes.
The bandits would eventually become these unkillable monsters at high levels. They would have thousands of HP.
Exactly. And now we're going to bring up the infamous I talked with Alex about this a while ago, but it was... So Oblivion had a difficulty slider. It was literally... They weren't like tick marks in it. It was literally just the left side of the slider was make the game easier, and the right side of the slider was make the game harder. And we talked about... Was this put in at the end of the game when they're like, hey, we screwed up the balance on our game, so just stick this in and it'll add a modifier to all the HP values or whatever it does.
Right, it does. It multiplies the damage you do and the enemies do. Yeah. Obviously, inversely, depending on what difficulty you go at. But yeah, it had to have been added near the end when they realized, wow, this system could have problems.
Uh-huh. And that's just... It's just bad game design.
Yeah, you should never have this slider in the game.
Like, I can see one way of, like, letting the player decide how difficult they want the game to be, but this was literally used because, hey, if you hit level 50 and you have the strongest gear in the game and you're perfectly min-maxed on stats, it still takes 2 minutes to kill an ogre of just spamming left click because it has so much HP.
Right, and your sword will break every single encounter, so you need a mountain of repair hammers in your inventory.
Exactly. And I guess this segues nicely into kind of... Alex, do you want to talk about the leveling system?
Yeah, we'll get into the leveling system now. So yeah, part of the level scaling, the next thing that needs to be addressed is the leveling system that's in the game, where even if you get to the high levels, you might still be out of luck just because of how you decided to level your skills, and you had really no idea how to control it unless you read the included instruction manual. So basically, how the leveling system worked in this game was that you had major and minor skills that you picked at the start of the game, and every time you level up 10 major skills, you would gain a level, and then you'd have to go to an inn or to your house and sleep in a bed, and then you'd be able to level up. And you'd be able to level your attributes, which were like strength, intelligence, willpower. These things were removed in Skyrim. Basically all they did was they increased the damage you did, how much you could carry, things like that. The problem with that came from how it determined how many points you would be able to allocate each level. And it determined that by what minor skills you ended up leveling up to a certain cap. So basically, I could level up skills, just a random hodgepodge of magic and strength, and I'd get maybe 1 point in strength and 1 point in intelligence. If I leveled only, say, destruction and alteration spells, I'd be able to put 2 points into intelligence at a level up. So this could very quickly escalate out of control, I think you could see, because you could end up with substantially lower attributes at higher levels than what you could have potentially had if you min-maxed. And the game, because of the way it did difficulty scaling, it just... Yeah, at some point, your character would just be unable to actually do anything in terms of combat.
Yeah, and essentially you look up guides nowadays of if you want to do that super late game content, and essentially you build it the exact opposite of how you would think you'd build your class. And by that I mean you want to put the skills that you want to level, like what you want to do. Like if you want to be a fighter, you want to put like unarmed and like heavy armor and stuff as your minor skills, and then you want to set things that you don't do as your major skills. So that way you level up all your minor skills, and then when you want to level up, you do your major skills, like, I don't know, if you put like alchemy as one of your major skills, so you can choose when you want to level up, and then you can make sure that you can max out things like strength.
Right, but only what the system did, it made it almost counterintuitive to ever want to level up your character.
Yeah,
because
the game
it basically doesn't get any easier from level 1.
Yeah, I didn't get too deep into it, but I do remember being really frustrated because, like, you know, it was very opaque as to what leveling, or like putting skill points did, what the level up system did, and I was just mostly confused for most of my playthrough.
Right, I think it attempts to explain the leveling system in some pop-up tutorials during the prison segment, but good luck figuring out what they're trying to tell you. Eventually, you're just going to be wandering in the forest, you're going to run into some bandits that are wearing full Daedric and glass armor, and you're just going to feel powerless. They're going to just run you over.
All right, so we kind of went over what was good on launch, what was bad on launch, but there's always this aspect of a video game where we look at it after a while and figure out, wow, that really did not age well, and some games are unplayable at some points. So let's go over some things that don't work as well anymore in this day and age.
So one of the things I thought didn't work well, and I kind of brought it up earlier, was sort of the... I think overall, as a game, the art style of Oblivion holds up really well, but when it comes to, like, NPCs and their facial animations and the voice acting... I mean, the voice acting in general, okay? Because that game had... I've read stories, I think it was 10 voice actors, other than some of the celebrity voice actors that we'll talk about later, that they put in, but 10 voice actors to do all what? Like, let's throw it out, like 1,000 NPCs in the game.
Yep.
So it's one of those things that you start to recognize the voices very often. Like, oh, this is the Wood Elf voice actor. Oh, this is the Imperial Male voice. Yep. Mm-hmm. And you're like, oh, yeah, that didn't age very well.
Wait, did Morrowind have voice acting or no?
It did.
It did. But
okay.
It wasn't a fully voice acted game, which made it a lot better.
I see.
You didn't notice it as much. I almost think that, like, the game didn't really, like, every single line of dialogue didn't need to be fully voice acted. I think it was definitely one of those things where in those mid-2000s, that technology was kind of starting to get there, and the game sizes were starting to get a little bigger, where I don't think Bethesda necessarily wanted to do fully voice acting, but kind of just from the fans and kind of what some of the other latest and greatest games were doing, they kind of wanted to make this game seem a lot more next gen, so they put it in there. And I think at the time it was fine, but when you look back on it now, it definitely aged a lot and shows its age.
Right, yeah, the faces just nowadays, they look kind of comical. They don't really look very human-like, but back in the day, they looked pretty fantastic. And yeah, the voice lines, they're all average at best. But there's plenty of memorable lines you hear, and everyone loves to make comments about them, even today, so they must have done something right. And
on the note of, like, the animations and the facial things, like, there are so many memes on it nowadays. How awkward it looked. And
the extreme expressions people make when they hate you, and just the goofy smiles they get on their faces.
And then the same reactions, like whenever you punch someone, they're like, "Ooh, I've fought mud crabs tougher than you," stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. I think the whole zooming into the face aspect kind of spooked me.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when you're getting ambushed. Yeah. You're getting ambushed. You're, like, walking, and the camera just moves right into their face. And you're like, oh.
And just going on what you said earlier about the sneaking, when you, like, think you're hidden, and then, like, your camera spins 180 degrees and zooms in on a guard's face, and he's like, stop! You violated the law! And you get spooked really bad. Oh, my God.
So to me, I feel like Elder Scrolls in general, the combat system is a little clunky. Maybe that's just due to how I play it. But I guess since I feel like they haven't changed it much from game to game. Even there are other, like, Fallout series that they do. So although it feels a little clunky, I think it's aged okay. I don't know about you guys.
I think it's aged okay. I think it still is a little weaker compared to some RPGs out there. It's not too much of a skill-based combat at all. It's kind of... I mean, obviously there's blocking and stuff like that, but there's no, like, compared to a game like, I don't know, like Witcher, where you can, like, there's a dodge button. You can roll out of the way. You can use your ward signs and things like that. I mean, Skyrim has like spells and stuff, but if you're mainly like a fighter class, if you're not using a shield, it's literally just trying to like awkwardly like strafe out of the way, and you're just kind of spamming left click a lot. It works completely fine. I like that it's simple. Sometimes like I don't like Witcher on the other hand is a really stressful game. Or compare it, kind of just throwing it out there, but like Dark Souls, not nearly a similar game like this game, but very stressful combat, and I don't think that's the way that Bethesda wanted to take the combat in the Elder Scrolls games in general.
Yeah, I think just in terms of all the other systems in the games, they wanted to keep the combat relatively simple and easy to understand, easy to get into. They didn't want to throw all these perfect parries and things into the system that could potentially create more problems in the balancing, because ultimately you're going to have either NPCs that are going to be sidekick and just react to your every move before you even make it, or you're just going to be able to destroy every NPC without any trouble. So I think they wanted to just keep it a very simple RPG style combat where it's basically hit to roll over and over again until one of you wins.
Mm-hmm. And then I think that, kind of going on a different topic, I think one of the things, and they realized this when they took it out in Skyrim, but one of the things that didn't age well was the whole acrobatics stat line of the game.
Oh, but that was the most fun part of that game.
Is that the one where you just jump a billion times to get skill?
Yeah.
And then eventually you can like jump and your character's jumping like 12 feet in the air.
Yeah, that was always the most fun part of Oblivion, though, is you just level up your speed, acrobatics, athletics, and yeah, you just jump real high and run real fast. That was the best part.
It definitely adds to the charm, but I think it definitely doesn't age well.
Oh yeah,
like
it was real goofy, and it wasn't really fun at all to level. Athletics and acrobatics were both awful to level. Acrobatics, funnily enough, was fastest to level if you were actually just falling off of things instead. Because you gained experience for points of falling damage you took, so yeah, it was really weird, and no, I definitely agree. It was very silly things that were probably best removed, but, you know, it just kind of created a fun charm to that game. Something goofy you could do in level when you just didn't feel like taking it very seriously anymore.
For sure. And I don't know if this is the time to bring it up, but some of those goofy jumping animations and all that facial animations that we talked about earlier, it all stems from the engine.
Our favorite engine.
Oh god.
Who wants to go into it?
Do you want to? I don't know. Do you want to introduce the engine, Tristan? Or
sure. Our favorite engine, Todd's favorite engine, I would say, is named the Gamebryo engine. It's not in-house. It's developed by another company, but it's been used pretty extensively in the industry, used by games such as like I think where to go? I had a list here: Civ 4, Divinity 2, Lego Universe. Who could forget that one? And it was also used for Morrowind, so they kind of use the same engine for both of their games, released 4 years apart. And I guess the entire gaming community has some pretty nice opinions about this. Alex or Albert, did you want to go into what you think about it?
Yeah, I'll start with the easy to pick one. And you mentioned Morrowind Oblivion. This game went on to be used in Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas, Skyrim, and most recently Fallout 4 as well. So this thing is still trucking along. It's starting to show its age. But I think the number one thing that ekes me is the physics engine in this game. Everything kind of feels like floaty a little. Like gravity's not really affecting things as much as it should be. Like you drop a cup and it kind of just, I don't know, floats to the ground slowly. And then like, especially in like Skyrim, when you're showcasing like how the engine works, when you like Fusro Da table, like a dining table, like everything just kind of flies out like crazy, stuff like that.
But what about the paintbrushes? They don't seem to fall at all.
That's true. That was actually fixed, though. That was fixed.
Yeah, it was eventually, but yeah, that was always entertaining in Oblivion.
So, a quick reference for those who don't understand: there was a paintbrush entity in the game that you could like pick up from anywhere, And if you dropped it from your inventory, it would float in midair right in front of you. It was not affected by gravity. And so you could build a stairway to heaven by dropping a paintbrush, jumping on top of it, dropping another paintbrush, and it drops at like your waist level, so you can keep like climbing them higher and higher and higher.
You'd have the endless staircase, and it was actually a very popular thing for the any percent speedrun to use that to get to the ending cutscene really fast.
There you go.
But yeah, it's funny how buggy it is, yet Bethesda is, I think, the only company that's been consistently using it, right? Like, for literally all their games.
Yeah, and I've done some, like, little bit of reading on, like, why they use it, and apparently it's kind of how their development works internally in terms of, like, quick turnaround, I think is what it was, where they want to be able to put something in the game as soon as they've, like, coded it, like, they've wanted to, like, run a build, and apparently it's really fast at that, but I think... And I hope that, like, it's Fallout 4 is, like, the last game that Bethesda uses with this engine.
Yeah, playing their more recent games, it really does feel like I think they're going to need a new engine going into a new game, but yeah.
Well, that's what we thought with Fallout 4 as well, and then we saw the gameplay trailer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of a buggy mess... we can probably all agree that Bethesda games are usually a buggy mess when they come out. It's funny because they took 6 months to optimize the game and they delayed it, and it was still buggy shit show. So, looking back, did you guys both buy this on release or a little later?
My brother bought it on release when he played it.
Yeah, I bought it for 360 maybe like 2 or 3 months after it came out.
Okay. So looking back, I mean, we all agree it's a good game, but is it good, like, vanilla, no mod, or is it only good because of all the mods that came out?
I actually think Oblivion stands well on its own as a vanilla game. As I said, I spent plenty of time playing it on the 360. It had just so much content, and yeah, a lot of it was buggy, but luckily few of the bugs in Oblivion seem to be soft locks and things that would prevent you from finishing quests and things like that. Most of the bugs were just kind of silly things that would happen, and it's kind of a lovable thing that you run back and just kind of see happen. It's just one of those fantastic things that Gamebryo brings to you.
Yeah, and I have a similar experience. I wasn't super big when I first played it on my own. I didn't really do any mods at all. And it's a perfectly fine game. And in terms of the only mods I can even recall using when I played it a second time was, I think there's always a big unofficial Oblivion mod that fixes a lot of the bugs from the original game. Yeah. That's like one of the main
communities come out with bug patches for these games that fix most of the major soft locks and things that you can experience while running through quests and things like that. Mm-hmm. A lot of the crashes as well if you're going to certain areas. Yeah, they do a good job.
Yeah, and I almost think they'll never say it publicly, but I think Bethesda actually for PC, at the very least, kind of depends on these community modders to fix those for them.
Yeah, and that's always been a rough spot for me. I kind of don't like the idea that Bethesda does seem to rely so heavily on modders to quote-unquote fix their game, but overall... You consider the scale of the game they've made, all the stuff they've done for it, it's kind of at least passable that you can say, okay, sure, we'll let them get away with this. Mm-hmm. And of course, it does go to be said that they do provide modding tools for the engine, and people have created just spectacular things for the games over the years. So I can't fault Bethesda for that when they make it so easily available, easily moddable, in such an easy-to-use UI system for their modding.
I think it's one of those things where Oblivion is a perfectly fine game on its own, but with mods, it gets even better, depending on what you want to use.
Oh yeah, you can extend out your playtime easily just through all the player-made quests people have done, entire quest lines really, and just new guild quests, things like that. Yeah, there's just endless content if you're looking for it.
Tristan, did you ever look into any mods for when you played Oblivion?
I mean, I applied the play the fixes one. I know Bethesda always has issues with mouse acceleration, so that's usually the first thing I look for.
Yep.
After that, I think I did try out a couple, like quest lines?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I just couldn't get too much into it.
One of the mods I always did when I played Oblivion was Midas Magic. That added a bunch of spells. Yeah. And
that was a classic.
Yep, they put that in Skyrim as well, of course. But I thought, we'll get into it later, but I thought the spells in Oblivion the magic usage was pretty good overall. But Skyrim kind of fell off a cliff when it came to that.
Yeah, over the iterations, they have been removing a lot of this fun spells you could get in, say, Morrowind, like a levitate and things like that. But overall, Oblivion still had a lot of choice in terms of what skills you would have, things like weaken armor and drain attributes, things like that. So you'd still be able to create a pretty varied mage character if you wanted to go that route.
Yeah. And I think definitely without like any mods, everything is pretty viable for the most part in Oblivion.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. There was really nothing that was too weak where you were just basically screwing yourself over by choosing it.
Yeah, and like that's like not including like the weird scaling and leveling stuff.
Right, exactly, yeah. Mm-hmm. There, of course, have been mods to fix the level scaling or alleviate the issues created by the level scaling system. People have created overhauls that completely change health values and how enemies scale, things like that, with their HP and damage. So it would basically make the game feel a lot better. Your progression would be a lot more noticeable without making you too overpowered or underpowered. So it's really good to see what the community could do for this game.
Yeah, so, I mean, we talked about this in scope of Oblivion, but I also mentioned that this is kind of more of a ongoing issue with Bethesda, where they tend to release kind of broken games, and gamers seem to still gobble that stuff up, right? Like, Skyrim sold millions and millions of copies, Fallout 4 did okay. Why do you think that we continue to think that this is an okay cycle for gamers to be in, where, it's kind of broken, and then we have to wait for the modders to fix it, and then, it's really good then. Things like that.
Yeah, so one of the things I think was interesting, and I want to hear Alex's kind of opinion on this, was, as someone who's only played Elder Scrolls, at least Oblivion, on a PC, when things got stuck, and there was no patch, one of the best things about PC is having the dev console available. And this can do a lot of things. Like, you can, if a quest bugs out, like an NPC is not delivering their line of dialogue, you can put in a command with the quest ID and everything and progress the quest to a specific stage to get rid of a soft lock or whatever. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's okay, because for the most part, when it comes to those weird bugs, or if you get like stuck in the ground or something or whatever, you can no clip with the console just to like bring you out of the ground or whatever. So a lot of those things that are minor that aren't like soft locking your game or whatever, you can get out of on the PC, but on the console end, that's not possible, because Oblivion was the first Elder Scrolls to come out for console, and it didn't have that feature in it.
Right, exactly. So there were times where an NPC would get stuck in the Xbox version, and basically you just had to hope that your last autosave was in the correct spot, not too far back or after the point of no return, so to speak. I think there was actually a quest line in Shivering Isles where an NPC would just not ever do the correct thing it was supposed to do. And you basically just had to wait for them to patch the game. And it came a couple weeks after Shivering Isles had come out. But yeah, that was a major issue, and that's always an issue you'll run into when you're playing this game on consoles. But overall, I think the reason why people are so accepting of the broken experiences, or, when they're kind of not always working so correctly, is that overall, you're still getting a pretty good product out of an Elder Scrolls or a Fallout title when it comes from Bethesda. It just has so much to do. You can usually find enjoyment still in all the things, and sometimes even the broken things create more enjoyment overall. Like the stupid bucket strat you can do in Skyrim, things like that, to steal things from NPCs. Like, I don't know, you can just kind of laugh at it and get away with it. Most of the things, like I said before, just don't really create a situation where you're completely locked out from being able to continue or do things like that.
And I hate to say it, but Bethesda they're one of the few companies that can do this. They're a company that can rest on their laurels in the fact that their games are buggy. So a Bethesda game comes out and people expect there to be bugs. Like, juxtapose this with if a Nintendo game came out and it had soft locking bugs, that game would tank. But with Bethesda games, they can get away with that. And I think they're a really interesting position in the industry where that they are allowed to have bugs in their games and gamers will accept it.
Mm-hmm. I think it's just the whole scale thing. It's just the games are seen as just so big that people are like, all right, well, sure, it's going to be a little buggy in places. It's just so big. How do they play test it all? So yeah, I think that's just ultimately what people see and that's what they accept.
All right, makes sense. But Bethesda does kind of support the game, right? They release the game. It's not like they just kind of go off and make their own thing while modders are fixing it and providing more content. Bethesda does actually do a good job, well, at least at that time, to provide content updates. And they released kind of 2 big DLCs during that time, right? They had
Horse
Knights of
Armor?
the Nine.
That was one of the biggest DLCs in DLC history.
Well, we'll get to Horse Armor in a little bit, but there was Knights of the Nine and Shivering Isles. Just kind of, do you guys want to go into what they provided, what they added? I know Shivering Isles is basically one of the best, biggest acclaimed DLC in video game history. So, do you guys want to go into that?
Yeah, sure. I can't speak much higher of Shivering Isles. It is definitely one of the greatest DLCs out there, and basically it was kind of like a full expansion, really, of the game. It added a completely new continent to the game, and it just had its own locations and quests, and it just had basically up to about, I would say, 50 to 60 hours more of content.
They honestly could have released that as a separate game. And it like if they added a little more content, they could have added this as a separate game. Like that's how much of content it had.
Yeah, this definitely was less of a DLC, and I guess what modern gamer eyes would be, and really truly an expansion of like say Brood War or Diablo 2 Lord of Destruction, something like that
Frozen
instead.
Throne for Warcraft.
Frozen Throne as well. Yeah, it was one of the last ones out there, but it just gave so much content, and for a fairly good price point of about $30. So it was fantastic at the time it came out.
And kind of to like expand on it, the reason why it was such a great expansion was because it sort of changed the atmosphere from what the original game was. The original game was very tame. Everything was bright. The game had a lot of bloom in it. We haven't brought that up, but the game, the graphics, there's a lot of bloom in that game. So everything's really bright and colorful. But that game, it had like a weird, mysterious, creepy, random. I mean, you're in the kingdom of a Daedric prince of madness. So
right, there was a lot of gloomy parts, and there were also like purplish parts and golden gloom and things like that. It looked very otherworldly. Yeah, and just really awesome what they did with the graphics in it.
The environment was completely different and just changed completely from what the original game was, which is why I think because I'll go. The second piece of content was the Knights of the Nine DLC. So that one didn't really add. It was kind of if what is it? I'm forgetting the name of the expansion. Oh, if the Shivering Isles was its own sort of world, was like Oblivion 1.5, Knights of the Nine was just Oblivion 1.0 additional quest line. And it wasn't a bad quest line. It's if you liked what Oblivion did and you liked their quest lines, it was a perfectly fine expansion. But it just pales in comparison to what Shivering Isles was, which is why I think almost no one remembers or talks about Knights of the Nine at all. It's very forgettable.
Right, yeah, it was almost more of an add-on to the main story of Oblivion in most respects. So it was much smaller in scale to Shivering Isles. There wasn't as much to expect. But it still added quite a bit to the game in terms of items and things to explore, so...
I mean, not just items. I think the number one best thing it did was the writing in the expansion was so good. Like, Sheo Gorath's writing, like, literally as a kid made me laugh so many times.
Oh yeah, the entire questline series for Shivering Isles was just fantastic. All the NPCs you would run into in the town, Mania and Dementia, they were just great. What they designed.
Yeah, and the characters, like, I forget the name of it, but his Sheo Gorath's assistant, who would talk to him all the time, but is, like, always, like, depressed and, like, trying, like, super monotone, but his writing was great.
But yeah, you really felt like you were in this realm of madness, basically, because all the NPCs had these weird intricacies and just quirks to them that would just make them seem really off in what they were even talking about. And they would send you on the weirdest of quests.
Yeah.
Like, there was one that, sent you off to find a tuning fork or something?
Yep.
Yeah.
And then there was, one of the cool things is I liked, you talked about the two different kingdoms, Mania and Dementia, was it?
I think that's the name of them.
I always forget the name of the two, but, like, how one of them had, like, I don't know how to describe them now. They essentially, like, they're giant, if you played Overwatch, they're like Widowmaker-esque guards. They're like purple people, female guard people. And then, like, the other side, coming back from Morrowind and seeing, like, I remember one of the strongest enemies in that game was Golden Saints.
Right, the Golden Saints.
Yeah, the Golden Saints for the guards of the other place. That was, like, a really cool throwback, and getting to see, like...
Oh, yeah, the Dark Seducers were what the...
That's what they
Dementia ones were called, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And just getting, like, having that throwback and seeing, like, that old character model, or, like, creature model of Golden Saints and Morrowind brought into Oblivion, and kind of seeing, like, for them, like, the high-definition graphics of, like, what that model would look like was such a nice kind of nostalgic point.
Yeah, and they gave you that cool little bit of fan service where eventually in the quest line you'd be able to summon them as a daily power. It was really fun and cool. And just like, oh, this is awesome.
Yeah, so Bethesda, kind of did both sides. They released really good kind of like expansion pack-like DLCs, similar to what they did before, like you mentioned in like StarCraft, Warcraft. But they were also kind of the leaders in what you would say is like modern DLC. Albert, you mentioned Horse Armor. Basically, they were trying to see what they can sell on the marketplace, the Xbox marketplace, and they put up literally just a what would you call it? A cosmetic armor for your horse.
It was completely aesthetic. It did absolutely nothing. Basically, nothing attacked your horse in Oblivion, anyways. But it didn't actually protect your horse any more than normal. But so it was just purely for looks. But yeah, it was universally panned back in the day. But overall, obviously, you look at today's stuff, it seems very similar to what Horse Armor ended up being, so...
I recall there being even, like, a counter, like, not like protest per se, but didn't modders release their own Horse Armor DLC to just be like...
they did. Yep.
To, like, shove it to Bethesda and be like, how dare you, like, charge for this crappy content? And I recall back then it was, like, $3 or something? Was it $5? I don't remember the cost.
I think it was $4, but yeah, it was less than $5.
Yeah,
it was still too much.
Yeah,
the fact that it cost money.
I mean, and now we get our own controversy with Bethesda's paid mods, and
that's a whole nother egg.
Yeah, we won't get into that, but
this was the beginnings. Basically,
they were just testing the waters, and it's finally come to fruition.
Yep.
What, roughly 12 years later?
Hey, just imagine if we were back then, man, they would be releasing Oblivion on like 6 different times too. We'd get it on N-Gage, we'd get it on everything.
Oh boy.
Oh yeah.
Wait, was Horse Armor, wasn't it just exclusive to Xbox? I don't think it was.
You could get it on PC too, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty certain you could. I definitely know it was on 360 though.
All right, so I think we talked about the next point already, so we could skip over that one. Kind of jumping from paid DLC, one thing we haven't really touched on, which we briefly mentioned, was kind of like the world building. You guys mentioned voice actors, and Bethesda actually kind of did something cool, at least back in the day, by bringing on a lot of celebrities to voice act their characters. I don't think this was very common back in the day.
Yeah, you see Death Stranding, it's got Del Toro and Norman Reedus, just
right.
Name after name thrown into these games. It was just never seen before when this game came out.
Yeah, so I think we had Sean Bean was here. I know you guys had a list going yesterday, but now I can't find it.
I think Linda Carter was in it. I think she did a generic voice, I think.
But yeah, the major one people will know in Oblivion is Patrick Stewart. He was the voice of Uriel Septim, the Emperor. I don't know what to say about their actual use of that voice. But overall, I guess I'll spoil the first 10 minutes of Oblivion.
Hey, spoiler, 12 years later, spoiler alert.
Emperor Uriel Septim dies in the first 10 minutes, so Patrick Stewart, you won't hear him for long. But I think this is kind of a trope of Bethesda games also at this point, where they'll hire a well-known actor or actress, Patrick Stewart for Oblivion, or Liam Neeson for Fallout 3, and they're just in the game briefly, and then they're just gone. They get killed. So, yeah, I don't know what to say about that, but I don't know how effective it is to have them in the game if they're just gonna kind of only leave them in for a few minute cameos, basically.
I thought Sean Bean as Martin Septim was fine. I thought like Martin Septim in general, or not even just Martin Septim. I think Sean Bean, he actually does do quite a bit of video games. I don't know if Oblivion was his first, but he did all of Civ 6. He did like all of the voice acting in that game. So I think Sean Bean has a really distinct voice as well, that I think it worked completely fine for him in that game.
Yeah, part of me thinks, if we don't know which way this is going, right? If Bethesda's going out hiring these celebrities, or if these are celebrities that enjoy the Bethesda games and just kind of like offer to help out for a little bit. Because like Alex said, most of these folks are only in the game for like 10 minutes at max. They probably recorded in like half a day. But it's interesting to see that, Bethesda's able to consistently get all these kind of non-video game folks to get on board. I think Oblivion kind of marked a part of my gaming gaming life, where I finally swapped over to PC gaming. And it also introduced me, because before this I was only playing JRPGs if I were to pick up a JRPG. So it provided me a good introduction into like, there are these other types of games, there are like mods and things you can install. So I think it was a good turning point in my life, and it provided a pretty smooth way into doing that.
Yeah, it definitely came out at a time where PC gaming was becoming a lot bigger than it used to be. System requirements were becoming a lot more real. You couldn't just run any game anymore off of your Pentium 4 processor and expect it to actually run without any kind of video card. Back before Oblivion came out, there were really rarely any PC games that I would regularly play. Maybe like Diablo 2 or Deus Ex. That was about as far as it went. Other than that, I would be playing Xbox 360 or whatever to actually play games instead. This was a game that just, as part of my childhood, I enjoyed a lot, and for all its faults, it still got through it, still put plenty of time into it. Is really a great game, and I'm glad it came out when it did.
And it's one of those games where we said a lot of bad things about it, like in terms of flaws that it had, but it's literally like most of those things you notice only because you put so much time into it that you were able to nitpick those small bits. Like the NPC voice acting, like if you only played the game through the main quest for like 20 hours, like you wouldn't notice any of that. But when you put like hundreds of hours into this game, yeah, you're going to notice that.
Yeah, you run into town, these NPCs have these completely disjointed conversations. You run into the beggars, they have completely different voices when they say certain lines. It's silly. It was definitely showing some of their budget constraints, but you just put it off. It was completely fine past that. You'd still play plenty of time into it. It didn't stop you at the least.
I have a final thought. I have like a closing.
Okay.
Even coming back to this game, even though I played it 4 years ago, takes the sense of awe away when you leave the Imperial City and you look out into the distance, and then you turn back around and you just see the giant towering Imperial City. Like, that's just a great feeling of like, that sums up this game's experience. It was just awe-inspiring. Just going, and then you could go into the city and kind of visit all the different districts. This game just, it pushed the RPG genre forward in a lot of ways. It obviously had its setbacks, but it just had its own charm that no other, like not even Morrowind, not even Skyrim, like can take away from this game.
All right, great. Well, thanks for tuning in into episode 8 of TRC Podcasts. Hopefully we'll be around more regularly this time. We'll be on a monthly basis instead of bi-weekly. You can find us at our new site called Viewport Gaming. We're www.viewportgaming.com, where you can find reviews, features, podcasts from the three of us. And we'll try to bring you regular content. You can find us on social media. We're Viewport Gaming on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And as for this podcast, feel free to share it with your friends and family. We would love it if you can give us a little bit more exposure. You can find us on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Podbean, basically anywhere that has some type of podcast directory. I've been one of your hosts, Tristan Jung.
I've been host number 2, Albert Corsten.
And I was Alex Nestor, the third host.
Not in any particular order of importance, but we just decided to number ourselves like that.
Yeah, because Tristan's last in the priority.
Yeah.
Hey, the best things come in threes.
It's true. Anyways, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye!
See ya.